Hello and welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name is Joe. In this video, we will be doing a little bit of a gameplay of the game BlackHorse, a grand tactical game by Arrigo Velicogna. This is from Tiny Battle Publishing and is a fairly new game at the time of my doing this video. So we are going to basically play the at least some, if not all, of the first scenario, which is kind of a introductory scenario is what it's kind of positioned as, and the idea is this is kind of an out of the barracks surprise attack by the Warsaw Pact on NATO. This is a World War III hypothetical kind of game, and so we're just gonna give it a go and see how things go. This is a really straightforward setup for this particular scenario. There aren't that many units on the map. But as you can kind of see the map here, and I'm going to try and zoom in and show some more of the action as we play. You can kind of see the formation card here for the U.S. The Soviet formation card is over here on the right. It's kind of out of shot right now. I'll kind of zoom in on those as we go a little bit as well. I'm not sure how many turns I'll get through. Because we don't want to make the video too long, but I would like to give you kind of a little bit of a flavor of what this game is all about. So what we have on the map here is this area right here. This is the city of Fulda, which gives its name to the famous Fulda Gap, which was an invasion route into Eastern Germany or Western Germany, depending on the direction you're moving. Going back to the time of Napoleon. So this being the late 1980s, it was kind of a focal point for the stare down contest going on between U.S. forces that were stationed in that area and the group of Soviet forces in Germany that were across the line in East Germany. And you can see hopefully this red dotted or red plus signs, red crosses, I guess. This little path here. This is the border between East and West Germany. You can see, hopefully, there are a few counters on the map, and by a few I mean literally a few. We have the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. That is the unit that gives its name to the game, the BlackHorse Regiment. And we have 4 companies of that regiment here. We have Company A and D sitting here in just outside of Fulda in, am I on the wrong, I might be on the wrong hex. I think I'm supposed to be in this hex. But they are on the outskirts of Fulda there, basically in camp. And then we have Company C over here and Company B here. 2 hexes from the border. They are set to set up 2 hexes from the border. Which I believe was called OP Alpha back in the day, as they were kind of trying to keep an eye there on the Soviets who were right across the border. And speaking of the Soviets, they are right here. We have some units from the 79th Guards Tank Division, and this is their forward security element, basically. So these were the guys who were out at the front. They were out at the border, so to speak. The idea behind this scenario is that the U.S. forces are about to be caught by surprise by an out of the barracks attack by the Soviets. So I'll kind of look at I'll read just a smidge of this. Cold War scenario 1. Here they come. Cold War nightmares. The Soviets have launched a surprise out of the barracks attack across the Iron Curtain with little preparation. NATO forces have been taken completely by surprise. The first sign that the Reds were coming was a wave of strike aircraft dropping bombs on the 11th ACR barracks in Fulda. Troops from the 1st Squadron, 11th ACR, are scrambling to reach the general defensive position in time. Communications with 5th Corps are spotty at best, and the 3rd Armored Division is not coming to the rescue anytime soon. On the other hand, traffic jams, confusion, misdirection, and outright chaos have plagued the move of the 79th Guards Tank Division to the border. Only advanced elements of the division are actually moving toward Fulda, and the main body is still sorting things out. Surprise works both ways. Still, the Soviets appear poised to quickly overrun NATO's first line of defense. Now, up here at the top of the map, and I'm just going to pull the map down a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. So up here is our turn track. So you have our turn track here, and it's a 24-hour turn track. Each turn is 3 hours, so it starts at midnight, 00, 0300, 0600, 0900, 1200, 15, 18, 21. You get the idea. Over here we have the day track. It's a 4-turn campaign if you play the campaign game. So we're on day 1, and this particular one starts at 0600. So basically, these guys are turned over for some reason. That was their reduced side. Didn't notice that until just now. So basically, in this particular scenario, the Soviets will begin with initiative, which means they get to go first. This game has kind of a unique, I don't know if it's unique necessarily, but it basically, you don't have a limited number of orders. What will limit your orders is you're going to move on this command track over here. So you can see they're color-coded. 1, 2, 3 are green. 4, I think, is also green. Then you have 5, 6, 7, 8 are yellow. 9, 10, 11, 12 are orange. And then up through 15 is red. That's basically modeling the friction of combat, right? The wear and tear on the forces as, the chaos of combat, kind of rubs up against command and control of your units as you're fighting in this kind of, late 1980s landscape when, things were obviously advanced. The weaponry was much more advanced than World War II weaponry was. And each unit has its own box, and within those boxes, they will have units that will come in for reorganization if they get removed from the map. They'll also have possibly some artillery and helicopter support that would appear in these boxes, and then an engagement level, which will go in these green boxes. And I'll go through all of that as we play, but basically the idea is the more heavily engaged you are, there's lightly engaged and heavily engaged. If you're firing on the enemy, you are lightly engaged. If they are firing at you, you are heavily engaged. And that will be reflected in your rolls on the snafu table, which we'll get into as well, which basically can cause things to kind of spiral out of control depending on where you are on the command track. And you can see we have the 11th ACR is currently, according to the scenario setup, in the 4 box. Now, the Soviets, the scenario, at least as far as I could see, and I read through the whole thing, it didn't really say where the 211th Tank Regiment command track was going to be, because the 211th is right here. So I put it in 1 for now. Their HQ actually isn't really on the board yet either, but it will be coming in via reinforcement on the 0900 turn. Or yes, it will be coming in at some point very soon. So we have some units here. Your stacking limits are 4 companies per hex. HQs do not count. You have different modes that are determined by your HQ. So you have a tactical mode, a deployed mode, and then a march mode. And march mode, basically you're in column, you're very vulnerable to attack. Deployed mode basically means you are basically deployed and ready for combat. Tactical mode is kind of that in-between maneuverability, kind of maneuver and fire. Abilities are kind of balanced in that mode, so that's probably one that you'll see the Soviets in a lot because they'll need to move and fire, whereas the Americans might be able to use deployed mode a little bit more. And then everybody's going to be trying to use march mode to get reinforcements as they come onto the map. They're going to be using that mode to try and push them up to do what they need to do, right? If you're on the American side, you're looking to defend. You want to defend in depth, basically. I would say, kind of give a little ground, but make the Soviets pay as they advance. And then, of course, on the Soviet side, you're just trying to advance and knock out the American forces while pushing through to Fulda. So that's kind of the setup, and we're going to get started here. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, the Soviets get initiative because the first phase in the game is the initiative phase. Normally, you would roll you'd roll a 10-sided die for both sides. Sorry. And the higher roll would win initiative. The Soviets get a +3 once we move to the 0900 turn and so on through the rest of the game. But we don't need to do that because they get initiative here in the first turn because this is a surprise attack. So I've zoomed in, as you can no doubt tell. So you have Company C up here. This is 1st Squadron of the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. So we have 4 companies, as I already kind of mentioned here. So you can see here the orange 9 with the white 3 underneath it. That is their AP range, and that's cannon fire. The 18 over the 4, well, that's the firepower in the range. I kind of misspoke there. The 3 is the range, the 9 is the firepower, or their base fire value, and we'll talk about that when we do some combat here in a moment. Then you've got the anti-tank guided missile, 18 and 4. Then over here, the green 6 is their HE, so their soft target firepower with a range of 2. The 6 and 10 are their armor against the 2 different types of fire. So you've got a 6 against cannon and a 10 against missile for their armor. These 2 are identical, as is the Company A. Company D only has, they don't have anti-tank guided missiles. I believe that's the tank company. So that's the American side. Now on the Soviet side here, you've got bits and pieces of the 211th Guards Tank Regiment. And the way the Soviets kind of named their companies, they didn't use numbers. I mean, they used numbers, not letters. So this unit right here on top is 1st Company, 4th Battalion, 211th Tank Regiment. As you can see, it's got firepower that's not quite as good as the Americans. Underneath that, the 1st Company is the tank company from the 1st Battalion, and that is got an 11, so that's a little bit better. So basically what we have to do is, this is our HQ. It's got a command range of 1. That's that 1 in that circle there. So as long as the units are within a hex of this particular headquarters, they're in command. They're in TAC mode right now, which, as I mentioned earlier, can be fire or movement. It can actually be both. Okay, so I mentioned we're going to see fire, but we're not going to actually see Soviet fire, at least not at first, because line of sight. So you can see here we've got some woods, and the American unit is in woods. So this would block line of sight into this hex. So they can't see them. Neither of these units can see this unit. And of course they can't see this one either for the same reason. So what we can do is we're going to issue a movement order. Okay, and what that does here on the command track, let me pick this up so you can see it here. So this is the command track, right, for the 79th Guards, right? Here it is. It's on the 1 spot. So every time we issue an order, it's going to move up by 1 or maybe 2 sometimes. So they move up by 1. This is the artillery assets, their off-board artillery for the 211th Tank Regiment. So once we do that, now we have orders that we have given to our ground units here. Now, I briefly mentioned the snafu table. Now, typically when you activate a unit, and we just activated the 211th Tank Regiment, we would have to roll on the snafu table. But in this case, when the unit is in green, which they are on the command track as we just saw, you don't have to do that. So that means we can just kind of keep going. Now, you see there are contour lines on here. They don't have any game effect. What does have a game effect are the hills, and you can see the hill marker right there, the little triangle with the numbers. So hill 816, hill 901, etc., etc. And you also have, well, you can't really see it, but there's an Autobahn on here, and you have some roads as well. So they can now start moving. So if we say we take this tank and move it up, I think that's actually not a tank, but because it has an anti-tank guided missile. So these, I believe, would be infantry or mechanized infantry in this case. So they move here, right? Now this guy, once they move in here, he can do reaction fire. So since they've moved, you can see, even though there's woods here, they can see into that. You don't account for terrain in the firing or the target hex, just hexes between those two. So these guys can see them as soon as they move into this hex. Okay, now they can fire at them. Their armor's only a 1. So here's the thing, okay, you've got anti-tank guided missile capability with this unit. So we could fire that, but you have limited ammunition with your heat, because that's what it is, with your heat ammo. So if I fire it, then I would have, I would pick up one of the ATGM low counters, this guy right here, and then you fire it a second time and you get this. Okay, now they get refurbished, but it limits what you can do per turn. So I'm thinking I might just use my base, my cannon, basically. So you have a 9, the range is 3, that's not an issue, they're in the next hex. So that is what's called your base fire value, and then it gets adjusted for a variety of things. Okay, so for example, the BFV modifier for disrupted firer would be a -2. He's not disrupted. Firing unit in TAC mode. The American units set up in deployed mode, so they are not in TAC mode. Low on ammo, no. Range greater than 2 hexes for cannon would be a no as well. Smoke in the target hex, no. Target in deployed mode, no. Target in march mode, no. And then terrain, yes. Terrain is, of course, going to have an effect. And in this case, bringing our terrain effects chart here, we are in woods. So they're 8. This is AP. Now that says 12. I think that's a misprint, and that should be -2. Because if you look at village is -2, Wooded Hill is -2. I think that's just a printing error, and that should be -2 because 12 makes no sense. That would be an increase, and that is not what terrain typically does in war games. Okay, so we do get a -2. I'm going to play it as a -2, so that would be a 7. It did fail to account for the armor, which is a 1. So typically, the way it's explained in the rules is you take the firepower, which is a 9, and the armor, which is a 1, subtract, and that leaves 8. Then you adjust with all the effects, of which we only have terrain, which is a -2, leaving us with 6. So then we will take our dice tower here, and I'm just going to put it on map, and we have to roll a 6 or less for it to be a hit. And I dropped it on the table instead of into the tower. And we rolled an 8, which is a miss. Now, one thing I did not mention is because we fired, we do move our command track 1, 2. We increase it by 1. So the 11th ACR's command track is now a 5. It is in the yellow. And that's it. And then you would just kind of repeat the process. So the next unit moves up. And we can do the same thing again. And this time, maybe we use our anti-tank guided missile because this is a tank unit. And it has a 7 armor against heat, but only a 5 against cannon fire. But still, 9 minus 5 is a 4. And then they're going to get a -2 for terrain as well, leaving a 2. A 2 is much harder to get than an 18 minus 7, which is 11 minus 2, which is a 9. That seems like that's a better bet for hitting. Now, that is going to move their track up to a 6. Because again, this is, and they're also lightly engaged right now because they have fired. So when you get a lightly engaged, you get this counter right here, which we will put on our formation status card in the 11th ACR box. We'll just mark that as lightly engaged. That means the entire regiment is essentially lightly engaged. I know it's only this one company, or I shouldn't say regiment. In this case, it's a squadron. first squadron of the 11th ACR is lightly engaged, which gives them a -2 on this, or a +2 rather, on the snafu roll. They're also in yellow now, so that means that they could possibly have some bad effects from that. So, but let's get back to the matter at hand. So if I'm reading that right, I need a 9 to hit these guys. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to roll, and I'm going to get a 5. Now, when you get your result, we come to the old trusty CRT here. Your die is a 5. It was AP, 2D, and 2D means disrupted. And the 2 is the number of steps that are lost. So first I have to put this ATGM low on here because they use their anti-tank guided missile. Well, they got disrupted and they lose 2 steps. Actually, I messed that up. So they got disrupted and took 2 step losses. So basically the first step loss flips them. The second step loss takes them off the map and they go into the reorganizing box on the unit formation card. So basically they're pretty much battered and out of there. So that removes them off the map, basically. And they get to come back later. You can eliminate them if they're already disrupted and you hit them with 2. If they're already reduced and then you get a 2 again, that would be 3 step losses and they would be destroyed. In this case, they're just combat ineffective, essentially, and had to bug out and are now back in the rear, getting reconstituted, essentially. So that's 2 down. Yeah, two of the Soviet units have moved. All right, so we will continue our movement here. We're going to take this unit and move them up as well. You know what? I'm going to actually do it again. So this is going to kill off his supply of anti-tank guided missiles, but we may as well burn it while we got it, right? Smoke them while you got them. 18 minus 7 is 11. Again, we get a -2, and we will fire again here. And this time we get an 8. And an 8 on our armor piercing. Look at that, is a 3D. And a 3D means he's eliminated. So he actually gets killed off. And he's now out of anti-tank guided missiles. Okay, so now that moves their command track up again, meaning the 11th ACR. And now I'm not going to move the HQ just yet. I'm also not going to do anything with the artillery just yet. We'll move the recon unit up. And we will move the this tank unit up. And in neither case, well, I guess I might as well, right? You know what? No, my command, I'm a little leery of getting a little too far down that command track there for snafu reasons. So we're going to leave that like that. And then I'm going to take the artillery and the HQ, and we're just going to move them 1 hex here into Frankenheim Rhone. Like so. And that would be the end of the 211th's activation. They are on 2 on the command track right now. They took 1 casualty. 1 unit was pushed into the reorganization box. So now we would go over to the Americans. And so we can try to rally this unit, which would allow us to, well, not necessarily rally, but we'd roll like it was a rally to try and pull and try and basically restock their ammunition. Or I could give them a movement order, which would allow them to move because they are in a precarious, about to get overrun kind of situation. In this case, I think I may just leave them there and give them a fire order, maybe, even though that still means I'm out of anti-tank guided missiles. Regardless of what I do, I'm going to have to roll on the snafu. table, so we can take a look at that. So we are in yellow right now, right? So here's our snafu table. The condition, green, yellow, orange, red. We're in yellow. So you roll your die, and then down here, you get DRMs based on if your headquarters is disrupted or if you're lightly engaged or heavily engaged. We are lightly engaged because we have not yet taken enemy fire. We've only fired ourselves. So we would roll here and add 1. So let's do that. So I'm going to put my dice tower back. We're going to take our die, and we're going to roll, and we're going to get a 1, which is a great roll because 1 plus the 1 for the lightly engaged gives us a 2, and a 2 is NE, which means no effect. You can see down at the bottom, you can get a disruption, a low ammo, HQ strike, which would be an artillery or airstrike on the headquarters. All of those are bad, obviously. So getting a no effect is quite nice. So I am going to issue a, right now, we're gonna tough it out. We're gonna fire. So even though that means this guy won't do anything, it also means my command track will only go up a little bit. So he's gonna fire, and he will fire at, we'll fire at this guy again. So we've got a 9. His armor's a 1. That gives us an 8 minus 2 is 6. So we're going to roll here and hope that we do better this time. And we get a 6. So that is good. A 6 will be a hit. We pull our CRT out. Now we're AP 6 is 2D. So again, what that's going to do is it's going to reduce him, and it's going to send him to the reorganization box here. Now this guy can't fire because he doesn't have line of sight to any of the Soviet units. But that's going to do it for the US, and we're going to go back to the Soviets now. And again, until the Soviets decide to pass, this is how the turns will progress. We're just going to keep doing the same thing kind of over and over to ultimately play this out. So in this case, what we'll do now is just to kind of show how an assault works. We're going to assault this US unit with these 2 guys right here. All right, I'm going to adjust the command track here because we did give an assault order. Now, obviously, in this case, that's not going to apply to everyone, but because these guys won't be assaulting, but these 2 will. So as soon as you announce it and you announce your target, then you would announce any others that you were going to do in other places on the map. Like if we had somebody here or something, we could say we're assaulting in both, right? But in this case, there's only one place we can actually assault, and that's here. So they get to fire at 1 unit as it's moving in. So these are both armored units, but we're going to fire at the recon, I think, since they have a lower armor rating of just 1. And they have a firepower of 9. You cannot use anti-tank guided missiles, even if we had them. You can't use them in assault combat. Neither in this defender reaction fire, nor in once you're inside the hex and you're duking it out. And all of the hexes in this game are 1 kilometer across. So in this case, we can only fire AP at them because these are both armored units. So we're going to fire at the recon underneath here, who has an armor of 1. Our firepower is a 9. That is an 8. Their terrain, again, is forested, so they are going to get the -2. So that leaves us with a 6 again. So we will do what we just did, and we roll a 6 again. And so we know what a 6 is. It's a disruption and 2 step losses, which sends him to the reorganized box. So now we're going to have, this guy is going to complete his move and get into the same hex with him, and now we're going to duke it out here in this hex. We'll just do like this so you can kind of see both units as we fight. Now when you fight in close combat, you use the HE fire factor, and you alternate back and forth. So we've got the Soviets have a 7, and the Americans have a 6. Okay, so this is going to be a little difficult for the Soviets here. So you have a 7, and the the terrain effect for woods is 5, which would leave them with a 2. It also says firing unit in TAC mode is a -2, so that would actually put them at a 0. The range equals 1 hex. That would be +2. I don't know if it matters that they're in the same hex. You would think it would. Okay, so if I'm reading this right, the Soviets will need a 2 because of the +2, and the Americans would need a 3 or less. So the Soviets rolled a 0, and a 0 is HE is 1 disrupted. So they take a step loss and are disrupted. So they put that, and they get a disrupted. And now we'll roll for the American fire. And they get a 0 as well, which is also 1 step loss and a disrupted. So since both ended up disrupted, it's still a victory for the Soviets, and the Americans have to retreat 1 hex. So they will retreat here. And they're now in clear terrain, which is bad. They're also still out of any tank-guided missiles. It is now, that's all the Soviets can do, and because they moved into this hex, they are now out of the command range of their headquarters. All right, so it turns out that I had lost my counter for the 11th ACR headquarters, but I did find it. It's right here now. So you need your HQ to rally, because that blue 7 is a number that's important for rallying. Now the question is, because that's over in hex 0911, which is way off shot right now, because it's way to the west over in Fulda, or actually it's in Petersburg, I guess. But we've got a unit over here that is way beyond command range, but it says under its command. So I guess you use the 7 for that. So we are going to have to roll for snafu again. And I forgot to roll for it for the Soviets. They are now heavily engaged, not lightly engaged anymore. So when you are heavily engaged, you can see that you get a +2 snafu, and the cost of everything is doubled. So that means that we're going to pick up 2 more on our command track and go to 9, which is rough here. So here on the snafu table, we're now going to be in the orange column, and that means anything 5 or higher is going to have a bad impact. So we have to roll that before we can activate. And we rolled an 8, which becomes a 10, which is CB strike, which is a counter battery strike. We do have an artillery unit, but it has not fired, although it is marked fired. I'm not sure what to do with that. For now, I know I shouldn't do this. I just realized you couldn't even see that it was an 8. I'm going to ignore it for now. I just wanted to kind of show the rally roll. So we need a 7 apparently. Well, we're definitely adjacent. So that 1 becomes a 3, but it's still less than a 7, which does allow us to at least remove the disrupted marker. So that's nice, at least. That's the end of that, because again, we can't. He doesn't need to rally. That also, I believe, successfully takes care of that as well. So they are basically resupplied. 2, because it says any or all. Actually, I guess I would have to roll twice for that. Let me put that back, because I'm only going to roll once, because if I, it would take a second order, I believe, to do that. So they will stay out of anti-tank guided missiles and reduced. So they're going to be done. We're going to go back over to the Soviets, and the Soviets will issue a move order, which is going to push their command to 4. And they do need to roll first. So they're still in green. Actually, they're in green still, because the 4 comes after that. So now the next time they activate, they will have to roll for snafu. So they're going to use their move order to move their HQ and their artillery up to that hex. flip it back to the Americans. The Americans are going to pass. The Americans will pass. What I will do now is we will do an artillery fire with this unit right here. They don't have to have line of sight because this unit does, and I don't think the disruption matters for that. So this way we can also see how artillery works. So a hex is eligible as a target if it's within 3 hexes and line of sight of a unit of the activated formation headquarters, which it is. This HQ is actually in that hex. I just exposed the counter for the sake of the turn here. So again, a hex is eligible if it's within 3 hexes and line of sight. The unit can be in command or not. It is in command. This unit, oh, actually these guys are not. This unit becomes the spotter. It doesn't say anything about having to not be disrupted. So fire missions are executed the same procedures as HE fire. So it affects the entire hex rather than an individual unit, but using the artillery values and the artillery defense value of the hex rather than the HE defense value. So our firepower is an 8. The artillery fire modifiers, they are going to get a -2 to their BFV because the target is a hard target. This is not a soft target, it's a hard target. So that would drop them down to a 6. They're not low on ammo. Disrupted fire, no. Hard targets, -2. Low ammo, no. Smoke, no. Target in deployed mode, -1. So that would knock it down to a 5. They're not in the march mode. They are in open terrain right now. And open terrain gives them no defense, as you would expect. We're going to roll, and they have a firepower of 5, and we use HE results. They get a 5, and a 5, actually 5, Artie, 5, 1D. So they're already disrupted, but the 1D, they only have 1 step left, so they're actually going to be eliminated. And we can put our ATGM low out of there. Now this would get turned to fired if it was not on the map, but this is an on-map unit, which the Soviets have. The Americans do not. Their artillery is always off-map. So that would do it for the Soviet turn. The Americans have passed. They will pass again, I guess, because like I said, I don't want to increase my command track. I'm going to let Company C sit up here for now. The Soviets will also pass to kind of keep things moving along. Although I think what I might do now is just wrap this up because I kind of showed what I wanted to show. A few things I didn't talk about was movement, which because we only moved like 1 hex at a time, but there is a movement cost here for attack mode and march mode. And something that needed to be clarified for march mode is how many movement points you actually get. It turns out you get the same as you do in attack mode, which is 4. So, and if you're in march mode, there is a march mode marker. This is the marker for march mode. So say we put this guy in march mode and he was on an Autobahn, which is off map right now. But if this was an Autobahn, he could move unlimited on the Autobahn in march mode. Now, obviously, you're in kind of a precarious situation when you're in march mode, but it is a good way to quickly move stuff. So I'm going to wrap this video up, and I might continue this. We'll move on to the next turn. The Americans get some reinforcements. We'll have some helicopters that we can play with, so you'll get to see some helicopters. More of the 211th is going to arrive for the Soviets, as well as some of the 336th, possibly. There's some variability in there with die rolls and so forth. So, things will get a little bit more interesting. This I felt like was a good opportunity to kind of show some of the base elements of the game, at least as far as my understanding of them is. And I'm sure I made some mistakes. And I know, like Keith Talbot, for example, is pretty knowledgeable. I think he was a playtester. He might jump on, hopefully, and make some comments. Let me know where I screwed up, because he's done it in the past. And it's always good to get corrections. And so, people who watch this know how to do it the right way, not necessarily Joe's way, which isn't always the right way. And then, anybody else from, Tiny Battle who either, was involved with the game as a tester, or, maybe the developer or the designer or somebody, or Mark, one of those guys jumps on and has something to say. But, if you are one of the people who understands the rules maybe that I screwed up, please feel free to enlighten me and the rest of us who watch this. But if you have any other comments or questions, also feel free to put those up as well. That's going to do it. Thank you for watching. I'll do my usual like, share, subscribe, please kind of, request. But that's it. That's it. We'll see how things go. I may continue this. I would like to continue this, whether I do it for video or not. I'm still on the fence about. We'll see how things go, what kind of reception the video gets. But yeah, so like, share, subscribe. That'll tell me to continue it. Give me some positive reinforcement. But, yeah, that'll do it for now. I'm Joe. This is Hexed Encountered, and until next time, happy gaming.